Lights flicker overhead, casting monstrous shadows that writhe on the corroded metal walls. The groans of the USG Ishimura echo, a constant reminder of the hungry darkness that lurks beyond. Isaac Clarke, his weathered face etched with terror, blasts another grotesque necromorph into oblivion. But there's no relief. The nightmare on the Ishimura was just the beginning. Did EA slam the brakes on a Dead Space 2 remake? Was Isaac Clarke's fight for survival destined to end in the first game? We're diving deep into the rumors, the reports, and the unsettling silence surrounding the future of Dead Space. Strap in, Necromorph Stompers engaged, because this is Dead Space 2 Remake. What the heck is going on? Following the success of the Dead Space remake from the previous year, which was able to effectively replicate the spirit and gameplay basics of the original game, Electronic Arts may decide to go forward with a remake of Dead Space 2. There are parts of the storyline of the original game that might be problematic, despite the fact that the concept of a reworked and updated Dead Space 2 has a great deal of promise. It is safe to say that Dead Space 2 is an improvement over the first game in almost every respect. Taking into consideration the initial releases of both games, Dead Space 2 takes a number of bold measures, such as providing the protagonist, Isaac Clarke, with a voice and putting more of a focus on the action-oriented aspects of the series formula. A cruel and heartbreaking continuation of the storyline of the previous game is also included in the sequel. This continuation demonstrates how Isaac is coping with his guilt and the suffering he has experienced. Many fans believe that Dead Space 2 is just as excellent, if not better, than its predecessor. This is due to the fact that Visceral Games made judgments about gameplay, story, and presentation in Dead Space 2, and those decisions ultimately paid off. The well-crafted remake of Dead Space that was developed by EA Motive contains visuals that are more realistic, sound design that is improved, and brand new features such as the Intensity Director, all of which contribute to an increase in the level of horror that was present in the gameplay of the original. These kinds of improvements may work brilliantly in a remake of Dead Space 2, although the nature of the material in that game could make it a little bit more difficult to adapt it in a way that is tasteful. There are a lot of dark and unsettling moments in Dead Space 2, and some of the most unsettling levels are the ones that take place at the Titan Station Elementary School. However, despite the fact that these more controversial aspects of the game were met with considerable criticism upon its release, this did not significantly hinder the popularity of Dead Space 2, particularly since Electronic Arts embraced the darker aspects of the game via marketing strategies such as the Your Mom Hates Dead Space 2 television commercial. Nevertheless, it could be difficult to adapt them in a remake of the present generation, with visuals that are on the verge of becoming photorealistic, without coming off as crude or excessive. In addition to the fact that pitting players against rabid necromorph children and newborns is a terrible idea, Electronic Arts may run into significant difficulties when it comes to images of self-harm and suicide. Visions of Nicole, Isaac's love who took her own life in the original Dead Space, continue to haunt him throughout the second installment of the Dead Space series. Isaac, who is now experiencing mental anguish as a result of the marker's effect, has a hallucination in which Nicole is speaking to him in a manner that is unpleasant. There are a few instances in which the visions seem to encourage Isaac to take his own life by stating things to him such as "You can't handle the pain forever. Soon you'll be begging for a way to end it all, and you're trying to kill yourself, Isaac." What are your thoughts on the matter? A hallucination that stands out as especially memorable is the one in which Nicole taunts Isaac, asking, "What's the matter, Isaac?" This hallucination takes place at the primary school level that was discussed before. Are you worried that if you are to listen to me, you would cut your wrists? It is possible that Electronic Arts may be tempted to either eliminate or edit these moments in a remake, so making them less dramatic. These moments are designed to be frightening. However, if a Dead Space 2 remake were to be made, it would be a mistake to alter these crucial moments since they are significant representations of Isaac's guilt and they highlight the merciless ingenuity of the marker. At the same time, the hallucinations in the original Dead Space 2 walk a narrow line between being disturbing and being relevant to the story. It may be challenging to achieve this exact balance in a remake, particularly one that places a greater emphasis on realism and immersion. Over the course of the previous year, the Dead Space remake accomplished something that seemed impossible. It was able to provide a game that improved upon the gameplay and combat of the original, without compromising any of its qualities. The good feedback that the game has received has fans, both new and old, anticipating that there will be other remakes in the future. The best entry in the series, Dead Space 2, is scheduled to be updated next. A Dead Space 2 remake, on the other hand, is already at a disadvantage since the modernity of the first game leaves very little opportunity for the second game to build upon. It is possible that Dead Space 2 Remake may have a more difficult time distinguishing itself from the original games once it is published. Both of the first two installments in the Dead Space series were excellent examples of science fiction horror. The fact that the second installment is considered to be the greatest of the bunch is partly attributable to the significant enhancements that it brought to Dead Space's fundamental gameplay elements, which include the game's combat, mobility, and landscapes. It's possible that a lot of fans anticipate that a Dead Space 2 remake would achieve the same results. That, however, may not be viable because of the way that EA Motive handled the release of the game the previous year. The first Dead Space 2 game took the elements that were successful in the game that came before it and significantly increased the stakes. In addition to being larger, more daring, and more well-tuned, it provided fans with a far wider range of options. Furthermore, the sequel improved upon the navigation, mobility, and fighting presented in the first installment, including a control mechanism that was more fluid and providing players with more area to explore. In addition to these enhancements to the gameplay, Dead Space 2 included new and updated opponents, clothing, and weaponry, which contributed to the game's overall feeling of being more contemporary and action-packed. When Electronic Arts Motive decided to rebuild the first Dead Space game, they included many of the enhancements that were created in Dead Space 2 into the new version of the game. Despite the fact that this made it possible for the Dead Space remake to be successful, it also helped to close the gap between the two experiences. Due to the fact that there is very little to no space for additional modernization, Dead Space 2 Remake may have a difficult time distinguishing itself from its predecessor upon its first release. There are, however, other ways in which the game might separate itself from others, such as by capitalizing on the manner in which players experience its enhanced narrative and enhanced settings. Despite the fact that the Dead Space remake does not allow much opportunity for a sequel to enhance the fundamental gameplay, the location of Dead Space 2, which is called the Sprawl, provides a significant number of new chances. However, in the Sprawl, Isaac was forced to travel a wide space station that had a variety of residential, commercial, and religious sites. In Dead Space, USG Ishimura had confined Isaac in a space that was claustrophobic. This diverse selection of locales served as the basis for Dead Space 2's ability to keep fans guessing. Grotesque and frightening new adversaries were created as a result of the marker's influence on each area, which resulted in some of the most startling moments in the game. As a result of the large array of enemies, Isaac had access to a greater selection of weaponry, which contributed to the sequel having a significantly different visual style and tempo compared to the first game. In order for Dead Space 2 Remake to separate itself from the Dead Space remake that will be released in 2023, it would be beneficial for it to completely revamp the Sprawl, its adversaries, and the numerous locales that are included inside it. The use of modern gaming technology presents Dead Space 2 Remake with a wealth of opportunities to revamp the locations, sounds, and interactive components of the Sprawl. This may be accomplished by modifying the way in which players encounter these components firsthand, therefore giving them a fresh and exciting feel. Fans are hoping that the Dead Space 2 Remake will be able to surpass expectations and further demonstrate that the Dead Space series is one of the top franchises in the survival horror genre. However, it is yet unknown when the first news about the remake will be released. The Ishimura may be silent, but the whispers of a remake linger. If the rumors hold any truth, Isaac Clarke's fight from the Sprawl to the bloody depths of space is far from over. Until then, stay frosty and keep that plasma cutter primed. We'll be here, monitoring the situation, ready to crack the code on Dead Space 2 Remake the moment something breaks. For more chilling content, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave your theories about the remake down below.